Let's kick off the show tonight, welcoming in Barbara Edmonds, finance spokesperson for Labour. Barbara, looking cold as well, but welcome to the show.
Kia ora, talofa. Thanks for having me on. I wore a beanie tonight, made in Porirua, just so I can match you fellas with your hats, because I see you with the hat and a beanie on every night, so you know.
It's funny because I have a bit of an addiction to buying these caps. I've got about 50 of them. I just like wearing them. And I saw a comment. I don't really pay attention to the comments on Twitter, but I saw a comment about, hiding your bald patch wearing caps all night long. And I'm like, it's funny, even my nieces, I've got two nieces who are in their 20s. When my dad had his funeral last year, of course, I wasn't wearing a hat. And they were like, oh, you've got quite a bit of hair, Pat. And I'm like, yeah, it is literally just, I just like wearing hats. There's nothing else to it other than that. So go figure. But thank you for taking the effort. I guess if you're not going to go with the beard, the hat is the appropriate thing to go for. Thanks so much for joining us, man. We're excited to have a chat with you tonight. You are the finance spokesperson for Labour, correct?
Correct.
I always wonder what you call the person in opposition. Opposition spokesperson for finance spokesperson for Labour. I don't know, whatever.
However way you want it. I've been called lots of things, so.
We will, look, before we keep going as well, Whānau, if you want to throw a question in the chat, you're more than welcome to do it. But I want to remind you when we have guests here, if you do a super chat, that does not mean it will definitely get asked. I'm just giving you that heads up and that warning straight away. Just because you put through a super chat doesn't mean it will be asked. You're welcome to do it, but it doesn't give you a guaranteed response that it will be asked of our guest, just so you're aware of that. Right, just a couple of, maybe even last week, Barbara, me and Chewy were sitting here talking about the budget, and we went, I wonder if having a bit of distance from the budget, 2 or 3 weeks, because budget day is like all this information explodes. It's like a pinata. Is that the right thing? Where you hit with a pinata and it explodes and all this stuff.
Headlines come out.
Headlines come out, and even though the journalists have been with it all day, that this happens and that happens. In the CTU typically comes out after that and educates everybody what's really in there. That typically happens at some stage. But it would be really cool to get some thoughts from you around the budget, especially with a bit of distance. Like now that we're looking back on it, what else have we learned that maybe we didn't know on day one? And any of your general thoughts around the budget as well?
Yeah, so interesting enough, I haven't really changed my views from my initial look at the budget, which is, well, actually, I can't say what I actually really thought of it on the first time I glanced at it, but it's still backwards. It's not anything that's going to help us move forward. And for me, as you've seen progressively, as we've had a chance to actually drill into the budget, you see things such as the disabilities, top-up payment that we were doing, from the sort of the $2 to the minimum wage. You see things like that are being removed. We've just had scrutiny week, and more things are sort of coming out about what is missing. So, for example, the online gambling levy that's being put on, that national need to pay for some of their tax cuts. There's no funding in there for DIA to actually enforce and monitor it. There's funding there for IRD to administer and implement it, but there's nothing there for DIA. So, it's kind of the devil's in the detail, and I've said that quite a bit, even before the budget. And it just more and more, you're starting to see just how bad things really are and how they've just cut back so much.
You'll appreciate being Team Labour. It'll be difficult for a lot of people to receive information that you give out without thinking, just wanting to talk down the other side. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. But we look at it, and although we openly identify ourselves as sitting on the left, we don't hide that from anybody, but we look at it and we go, they're borrowing more than any budget that Robbo did, other than I think the first one from COVID where there was the wage subsidy. Yeah. But other than that, there's 5 other ones that this one's borrowing more for. When Labour did borrow more for the country in 2020, it was to keep people employed and to help businesses not shut down. And this seems to be, this is what we have to be careful of, Chewy. We have to be careful that when we keep repeating these things, we don't get sick and tired of them. I'm so sick and tired of saying this, because if it's important to say, it's still important to say that they're doing this borrowing to pay for tax cuts. And Are you able to give an objective overview of it for us and have a look at what's going in and explain if we've got anything wrong in that assertion? Like, are we missing anything as lowly plebs, not really knowing very much, kind of parasitical beings feasting off the dead carcasses of mainstream media? That's our new t-shirt, Chewy.
Wow.
What have we missed, if anything, or is it as simple as that?
It really is as simple as that. And you got to remember why people are so focused on the debt part is because right throughout the election campaign and sort of the year before the election, they just said, Labor's borrowing too more, they're ladling our country with debt, they're basically leaving this huge debt pile for future generations. But the numbers don't lie. So if you read a budget, you actually don't read the one that's the blue book, which is the summary of initiatives. And funnily enough, I've got one right here. Don't read that book. What you do is you go to the white book, which has the big treasury emblem on it. And if you go straight to the back page, it shows the numbers, shows the projections for GDP, for unemployment, for, basically how much revenue you're going to get and how much they're going to spend and what their allowances are. So they set this up for themselves because they basically ran a campaign of scaremongering around New Zealand's debt being terrible because of Labour. So they're getting their comeuppance, basically.
Yeah, I almost wonder how they can be so bold. Like, how can Nicola Willis literally stand there and go, nope, we're not borrowing for tax cuts. Tax cuts are costed out. We're not borrowing for them. And someone goes, yeah, but all those other things you're borrowing for that you wouldn't have to be borrowing for if you weren't doing tax cuts. So what, I think I got told off by someone the other day for being a bit too kind, but what we're saying is, at the very least, they're borrowing to enable tax cuts to happen, even if they're not saying the borrowed money specifically is going on tax cuts. I don't understand how someone can be so bold as to go no in front of a camera when the person is giving them the information. It both impresses and disgusts me all at the same time.
Oh, I think they just wanted anything to get into power, and if you can just stare down the barrel of a camera and just give it outright, don't flinch or anything like that, then that's what you have to do, right, to get that power. But the people aren't dumb. They know that if your tax, your income tax actual cuts are going to cost $10 billion, but you're going to have to release $12 billion worth of bonds, which is the debt, basically, it adds up, it doesn't add up. And you would have heard Chippy, on the day budget saying you don't need an abacus to work this one out. So I think it's the same with the cancer drugs and the respect that we're going to fund these 13 cancer drugs. And now basically they have to commit to it. They have to deliver those promises. Kiwis don't have a short memory. I'm still looking at, I shouldn't read the comments on stuff, on news articles and that. But you read some of the comments on it, particularly of one particular news site, and people are like, oh, Labour put us into huge debts and billions. So the fact is we have to keep repeating this, or especially for us in the Labour team, we have to keep repeating they're borrowing more than Grant Robertson ever did, except at the height of COVID. And if you look at COVID, it was like $30 billion for that COVID relief package, wage subsidy, the resurgence payment, the cash flow business scheme, so they repeated it right throughout the campaign, and we're going to keep repeating it right through the end, which is basically they're borrowing more.
Yeah. Shall we?
Yeah, I'm just trying to form my thoughts around this, because it really does seem that National get more cut through on banging the drum. Labour just spends. Labour just layers us up with debt. Labour is just, seething with public service lefties, and we're going to get rid of them all. You mentioned Treasury laying out the actual facts. Well, National's just spent months running down public servants left, right, and centre. So why would anyone look at the Treasury documents? Of course, they're going to say it's bad. Anyway, we've promised this thing. How do you combat that when a slogan or even a myth, like the myth of National being the sound economic mind,
the party of
is
business,
so pervasive? How does Labour combat that when it looks like at times facts don't do it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the unfortunate thing, right? When they're getting huge donations and have the ability to get the cut through because they can repeat and they can buy ads and they can just keep going over and over and over and over and over again. You know, like we had our regional conference this weekend and we had raffles. You know, we were selling food. That's how we make our money in the Labour Party. Whereas, you know, they have big, you know, billionaire donors who are able to give them, you know, here's $100,000, which you can spend a lot on media and ads for $100,000. So we just have to keep repeating it as well. But it is hard to get that cut through, particularly when you are basically, it feels like you're fighting a huge, well-funded, well-oiled machine, which is very slick. And here you come along with your buy my $5 raffle, 3 for $10, and try your best with the, you know, the small amount that you have, but you just have to do it.
The other thing that we need to keep telling people about is, as you say, 30 billion for COVID. When you look at the graph of debt in this country, you know, in the last 6 years of Labor, it went up about $25–30 billion. But the previous term under John Key, it went up 50 billion. So people look at it and go, "Oh, 100 billion, put on it." No, hang on. When John Key came in, it was around the 20 billion mark. By the time he left, it went to about the 70 billion mark. And then we had COVID and it's now close to like 100 billion. It's like, it becomes frustrating. Like, I mean, we don't really engage, I don't engage that much on social media, but when people just come in and go, you know, Labor was the worst for the economy this country's ever had, $100 billion worth of debt. And the reason I don't engage is because if you show them it, we're going to talk about it tonight, actually. I've got we did this segment last week called What It Looks Like to Be Brainwashed. And we're going to do volume 2 tonight, What It Looks Like to Be Brainwashed. And one of the things that happens is there's this thing called motivated cognition. Motivated cognition is when you have a preset outcome, a presupposed outcome that you stick to no matter what evidence is put in front of you. A plus B equals C. So if you change B, if I put a roadblock in front of B, that means you can't use that. You just go from A to a different position to get to the same outcome. And that seems to be the situation that a lot of voters, you know, so if you tell them that this is not the reason, this can't happen because of that reason, you can't get that outcome with this supposition, they just find a different supposition, no matter how wrong it is, to get to the same income. And I don't know how you combat that with money, with advertising, with whatever. I don't know how that's combated. I think that's human nature. And it's a real pickle, to be really honest, for trying to be truth tellers.
Yeah, and that's why it's almost, we need the champions outside of just the Labour Party, because people won't believe it if we say it. But, you know, will they believe, you know, the hundreds of people that marched for their disabilities, you know, the individualised funding, the flexibility? Yes, they'll believe them. Will they believe the you know, over 50,000 people that marched, you know, on the streets for the war against nature? Yes, they'll believe them. So you have to look at it as not just we basically spreading a message, but actually there are so many different movements that are now happening across our country to activate against this government. They may not believe us, but they can believe the movement.
Yeah.
And also, you know, if Matthew Hooton is even, you know, as right-wing as you could get, if you can describe Matthew as right-wing, if he's offended, I'm sorry. But, you know, when their commentators and, you know, economists like Michael Riddle are coming out and basically saying, well, this is the debt profile, this is, you know, basically tax cuts can be inflationary, et cetera, then at some point you got to start believing something, and maybe just questioning, actually, are they actually right? Because all these other people are saying this thing, not just that Labour Party that, you know, I may or may not like.
It's become tribal though, hasn't it? I mean, the world's become tribal, and then you figure out a way. I wrote a piece once called Ideology versus Intelligent Debate. And the premise of it was, ideologically, I know that I can't be right 100% of the time. Sometimes I'm going to be wrong, right? Maybe this is the time I'm wrong. So intelligent debate says I'm wrong sometimes. Ideology says I'm always right. I got it the wrong way around. So in other words, if you've got an ideology that says this is always the correct outcome, the correct answer, then sometimes you're going to be wrong. Whereas if you use a bit of smarts, you realize sometimes you're going to get it skewed off, and maybe through intelligent debate, maybe through a bit of understanding and, korero and thought, you can come to compromise here and there when needed to make the correct decision that's the betterment for everybody, I guess. Oh, I just wanted to mention something as well, because you mentioned marching for like the disability sector. I saw this came out tonight. Have you seen this, Chewy? Government scraps pay top up. 900 plus disabled workers miss out on minimum wage. The government is saving $56 billion. How much are they giving to landlords again? Over 5 years by dumping a program topping up the pay of disabled workers to the minimum wage. That could see 900 plus workers, mostly with intellectual disabilities, continue to be paid as low as $2 an hour. But the government says it's better than not working at all. It's better than not working at all to get paid $2 an hour from a government. Was it Nicola Willis who said the other day, well, if you want more money, just go and get a job.
Go get a job.
Just go and get a job. Even though we're told again today by the Reserve Bank we need more unemployed people, just go and get a job. If you want more money, just go and get a job, or work for $2 an hour as slave labour if you're intellectually disabled. Any thoughts around that, Barbara?
Yeah, I totally do. I've got lots, and which is why I mentioned, that basically those are the things you find after the budget when you have more time, which is that top-up payment that Labor had put through in 2023. I asked the minister today in the Finance Expenditure Select Committee, and I repeated what she said, which is, we'll make people more wealthy as get a job. So I put it to her, over 50% of those who are on the job seeker benefit, so it's about 180,000 that are disability, got a health condition, or are people that are looking after someone that's got a disability or a health condition. And then I think there's just under 80,000 that are sole parents. And I said, how do you expect them to find a job when economic activity we're on a downturn, there are less jobs available, and what are you going to do? You're just going to heal these people and expect them to go and find a job? And she waffled on about, of those that can work, they should go work. But she didn't actually answer the question of, well, there's no jobs there. How are these people who actually are off for a reason because they can't work? Yeah. Her thing was, well, our budget's about supporting working people. I thought, wow.
Oh. So that's actively this whole fear. We've had this whole fear this whole time that the most vulnerable would be the ones that hammered hardest under this government. And that statement actually says, hey, look at us. We're going to hammer the most vulnerable. They're not even hiding it anymore, Chewy.
Yeah, Nicola Willis actually out there smashing the piggy banks of intellectually disabled people is about as grim an image as I can imagine. That's remarkable. And yet there will be people out there that are go, God, no, none of my tax dollars going to leeches. I don't know if it's just the comments that I'm reading, or maybe I should stop hanging out in News Talk ZB's comment section. That would be great for my mental health, I think. Look, I'm seeing a lot more chatter. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, making this a one-term government. Something traditionally New Zealand has not been great about. We generally give everybody at least 2 terms. But I see more and more talk about how to make this government a one-term government. What in your experience would be a way that people can make that happen?
Well, Kiwis are ultimately, the majority of Kiwis are ultimately fair, right? They'll be fair in the sense that, we'll give them a chance. We'll give this new government a chance. And because, we voted the other guys out, we wanted change, so we give these guys a chance. You start back from December with the tobacco, unwinding the tobacco laws to bring in $1 billion for tax cuts. You start off then with basically all the different things that they're doing to basically wind back progression onto the Māori, and on what, all the different Māori initiatives, because Labour's really clear, there's inequalities in the system, and what was working before, what was happening before wasn't working. So you've got to try something new, which is why you would do maybe a Māori initiative or a Pacific initiative, because you want to basically deal with those inequalities. Then you have like the fast track bill. Then you have their really slow stance on what was happening with Palestine and Israel. You've got a constituency everywhere in so many different places. So Kiwis want to be fair and give the new government a chance. However, the government has basically come through with a railroad and they're saying, no, we got a mandate to do this stuff. Never mind any public consultation on things. Never mind, basically, some transparency and some checks and balances. Their view is, we got voted in, so we're just going to do it. And I don't think that's a Kiwi way, When John Key and Bill English committed to tax cuts during their first election, and when they got in, they looked at the books and made the call, actually, it's not the right time for a tax cut. We're going to delay it for another year because actually we need to get the books. We know we've got a GFC. There's a big economic shock. Now's not the right time for them. I think they would have had a bit more grace if they were a bit more humble. But because they're just basically ramroding it in with arrogance, Kiwis don't like that. And so I think more and more we're starting to see what is these different movements happening all around the place. Like for me, I'm a local MP. I've got a seat here in Mana, which is like Porirua, Kapiti and parts of Lyndon, which is a part of Tawa, just about 20 minutes north of Wellington City. And I lose count of how many people I meet every day that are basically like, oh, when's the next election coming around? And I'm not bullcuckering here. These are people that even are saying, and I've got friends who voted for National, they regret that now. So we've got a big job in order to remind people, because it could be their strategy. It could be their strategy to do all the unpopular stuff now and then hand out the lollies later in 2026 when the economy is forecast to look a bit better. But at the moment, you saw business confidence, a blip when they got elected, and then it's dived since. And this last May is probably as worse as it got. You can see that people aren't buying it, and it's quite clear they've got no plan.
I reckon Labour should be in election mode now. I thought this yesterday. It's like there is some talk about this government not lasting the full term, especially with Winston there. I reckon Labour, you don't have to speak to this, Barbara, but if Chippy wasn't going to be there at the next election, not even looking at the screen to see what you say, but if he wasn't going to be there, it would be time to get whoever is going to be there sooner, and Labour should go into election mode, because it could be a snap election, it could be an early election, or if not, maybe without the billionaires behind you, you need to say everything 10 times to Nationals once, which means you need to start now. And that, if I was sitting up on that in one of those offices with you guys advising, I'd say we need to start election mode now, looking at 2 years from now, because I think that's what needs to happen for that message to get cut through, whatever the message may be. Just some thoughts, just some free. This government doesn't pay consultants, so that's a free consultancy for you, Barbara, if you want it. So.
Feel that.